Chapter 50. Miraculous Healing. 1996 winter season was severe in Canada. During November 1996, Omar and his wife went on 2 months vacation to Hong Kong, India, and Singapore. When they flew from San Francisco, the captain announced that there was a severe turbulent air in Pacific Ocean and hence they should divert their route through north near Alaska and down Japan. He prayed for God's protection and they arrived Hong Kong safely. Commodities were very cheap. After a trip to Hong Kong, they arrived in India. The vacation passed very fast, enjoying the love of relatives and brethren in the Lord. They traveled to Singapore and had wonderful time touring the city and meeting Christians. Finally they returned to Canada at the end of January 1997. There was about 6 feet snow around house. After taking rest for couple of days he returned to his job. 2 or 3 days passed, he got common cold and cough. Couple of days later on February 3, 1997, when he was at workplace, he felt weakness in his legs. Next day he could not open water tap and do buttons as his hands were weak. The following day his family physician told him,
"You are in a serious condition. You may become worse at any time. You should not go home. Get admitted in the hospital immediately."
He immediately discussed with a neurologist and made arrangements for him to see Omar. When Omar reached the emergency, the neurologist examined him and said,
"You have Guillain-Barre syndrome. You may even lose ability to breathe, and if it happens we may have to put you on ventilator."
Shocked to hear this he asked,
"Is there a medicine that can stop it?"
He replied, "No. The cold and cough you had couple of days ago could be a funny flu. Antibodies attacked virus and by mistake your nerves also. This is why your muscles are becoming weak. Air is nothing we can do except we should wait until the process is over."
This was like a lightning bolt struck his head. He had seen 2 or 3 patients with this condition when he worked in a rehabilitation center of Christian Medical College and Hospital, Vellore. They were in the wheelchair with severe disabilities. He was gripped with fear whether he would end up in similar state. If he would be put on ventilator, he might not be able to speak or eat. He was troubled whether his wife would be able to manage day-to-day business in a foreign country where there was no relatives. Hearing this news, his wife came with the local church pastor. The neurologist explained to them the situation. They believed that Jesus Christ can heal him. Pastor prayed for him and inquired him whether he needed help. He told him in tears,
"If something happens to me, please do the necessary help to my wife. We may not need any financial assistance." He assured to do so and to ask the congregation to pray for him. After blood sample and spinal cord fluid were taken for testing, he was transferred to a ward. Omar and his wife prayed throughout night. How fragile is man's life? Good job, prosperous life, etc. disappear in a moment. All that is left out would be a disabled life. He felt sorry for spending all these years just for a secular job and welfare of his family. He decided to get involved in God's ministry-related activities and make his days very profitable, if the Lord cures him of this disease. The Lord saved him from the dangers doctors expected that night. Next day his wife informed this news to the relatives and Christians in Vancouver, Singapore, and India. Vancouver pastor requested Christians in Toronto and United States of America to pray for him. His sister and brothers in India arranged for prayer meetings at home and in churches. The Lord heard prayers and his condition did not deteriorate for next 2 days. On the 3rd day morning, neurologist said, "Your condition did not get worse as it was expected. If it continues like this for 2 to 3 days, we can discharge you from the hospital." Why? "Oh, you can come for rehabilitation as an outpatient."
They were very happy to hear it. That afternoon a physiotherapist came to do an intensive physical assessment and Omar said,
"It may not be advisable for me to do any physical activity as it may aggravate the situation."
Without listening to his caution, she tested his neck muscles and left arm muscles, by which time he was tired, and informed her about it. Even then she continued through both legs and right arm testing, following which he was totally exhausted and felt uptight in his body. He could not rest afterwards until next day morning neurologist came to see him. He explained his situation. Doctor after examination said,
"Yes, you are much weaker than yesterday and your condition has become worse. We should not keep you here. I will send you by air ambulance to the provincial hospital for immediate treatment." They felt sad, wondering what level he would reach. They called upon the Lord. Immediately they informed their friends and relatives in various countries. There was no better help than God. Shah Jahan in England encouraged him through telephone conversation. Within couple of hours he was taken by helicopter air ambulance and his wife followed him the very night by bus. When Christians prayed for him in India, God revealed to his sister in Salem,
"My daughter, if you will believe you will see the glory of God. Is there any miracle I cannot do?"
He also spoke to a lady minister of the church.
"I will not forsake my son. I will glorify my name by doing a miracle."
The Lord assured a pastor in Peace Center at Bangalore during chain prayer,
"I will heal my son without operation and I will make his bones strong."
And he showed a vision as if Omar got up from his bed and walked well. When Sister Radha and Ramasamy prayed for him at Madurai, Jesus promised,
"I will deliver him like Peter, just as I brought Peter out of the prison cell. I will glorify my name through this."
The Lord manifested same vision to Pastor Paulraj, UPC Church at Periyakulam. He revealed to his uncle at Coimbatore,
"Just as I saved Daniel from the lion's den, so will I save my son also. Without any damage I will heal him."
He also spoke to an evangelist in Tamil Nadu, "And the Lord shall guide you continually, and satisfy your soul in drought, and make fat your bones, and you shall be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters will not fail." Isaiah 58:11. In the Provincial General Hospital a central catheter was inserted in his neck into internal jugular vein which could reach close to the heart. It was connected to a cell separator and his blood was taken out to exchange plasma. Each session took about 3 hours. At the end of the first session the condition stopped progressing. At that time he was in a wheelchair. God started to touch him as an answer to everyone's prayer. What is impossible with man is possible with God. Everything is possible for those who believe. He underwent 2 weeks of plasma exchange called plasmapheresis. During this time he started to do physiotherapy and occupational therapy in his bed. After 2 weeks he began to walk with someone's assistance and a walker. TPM Pastor Martin, the first church minister, helped them very much and believers as well. It was very comforting. He visited frequently and prayed for him. After 2 weeks of treatment he was taken back to the local hospital rehabilitation center by air ambulance. He received rehabilitation program for about 5 weeks there. Local pastor and few Christians frequently visited and prayed for them, which brought comfort and encouraged them in faith. The Lord improved his health condition and he returned home on March 28, 1997, which happened to be Good Friday. On Easter Sunday, he attended the church service. 2 months are over and within this period, from a condition of wheelchair bound the Lord enabled him to walk with a cane inside the house. All glory, honor and praise to Jesus Christ. Many people including the hospital staff were surprised to notice this quick recovery. After 10 months of rehabilitation with physiotherapy and occupational therapy, he started
Back to work program.
with couple of hours a week work. Physical conditioning program in a regular gym and swimming pool were added to his life. After 1 year and 3 months, he returned to paid part-time job. The Lord will do everything for us, Psalms 138:8. The Lord is gracious and merciful. Chapter 50. Change of city and job. Towards the end of 1996, Omar returned to his professional career for few hours a week, and God helped him to build it up. The replacement staff got worried losing the job, started to oppose it, and devised many ways to keep the position. This staff managed to convince administrators. Saints prayed for God's help. After some time, all on a sudden the replacement staff left the position voluntarily. The administrators required Omar to return to full-time level of his job to help the center even before he was ready. God gave victory in this matter in an amazing way. As he was rejoicing, the center faced difficult financial situations to survive. The center was closed permanently and the therapy services were transferred to the local hospital temporarily. Union's effort was not successful and the services were dissolved as the government was determined to take time indefinitely to reorganize the service. Along with colleagues, Omar started to look for job locally without success. So Omar and wife decided to move to another city as there were job opportunities through union transfer process. After interviews, Jesus helped to have a half-time position. He faced many financial demands for like housing, and living, and maintenance expenses for his present house, etc. With prayer they took it as God's will for them. They were welcomed by the new church of that city that helped with moving. After 15 days he joined duty, Jesus made it a full-time position. Very soon, in few months, director of the department resigned. This director and executive director offered the director position to Omar. He was very hesitant to accept it. They encouraged him. After prayer, he accepted the position. God helped him to perform his job even though there was shortage of staff, more than double the workload, and other pressures. God's grace helped his wife to get a school teaching position after 10 years of break due to many obstacles in entering into the teaching profession. She had been going through this obstacle since she left India in 1989. Chapter 51. Miraculous Meeting. In 1999, they enjoyed TPM Ohio International Convention, USA, and the deputy chief pastor Dan told him, "You should have told your testimony in this convention." Omar replied, "If God willing I will tell another time." God helped us to publish our family testimony as a book. Pastor Dan excitedly said, "I would like to read it." "We will get a copy to you," politely replied Omar. Jesus answered the prayers for his youngest brother, opened doors for speech and language pathologist jobs for him and his wife in North America. After many years Omar had his family close in the same country. Jesus blessed Omar to buy another house on mortgage 10 months after his change of job in a new city. During the 2000 convention, Pastor Dan was given a copy of the family testimony book, Singing Nightingale in the Storm. Next day Pastor Dan told Ayub, "I read the book over last night and I like the copies given to our churches." Since Omar had just few copies, he got arrangement with his sister in India to send the copies to Pastor Dan, but he did not know whether it was done. Towards the end of the year, Omar attempted to share his testimony with some of the local churches without success. During the course of his attempt, a local church pastor Ken invited him for a breakfast at the pantry. As Pastor Ken, his son Pastor Larry and Omar chatted at the Saturday breakfast, Omar mentioned, "The Lord gave me opportunity to work with missionaries in India." Casually Pastor Ken added, Many years ago we had two missionary sisters in India at a place called Nightingale. Curiously Omar interrupted, "Is it Sister Margaret?" With surprise, he answered, "Yes." Omar with greater surprise, "Is the other one, Sister June?" Similarly excited he replied, "Yes." Omar was spellbound, looked at them quietly overwhelmed with shock and emotion, and thought how God is miraculous in causing them to meet. I worked with them in preaching the gospel and at the Bible school. They were equally surprised to meet a man in their hometown from their missionary work for the first time 50 years after the beginning of their mission work. No one expected about such a thing to happen. As they talked about God's ministry through these missionary sisters in India, Omar asked, "How are these sisters doing and where are they now?" They replied, "Well, Sister June is ministering in Portland, Sister Margaret is suffering from Alzheimer's since 1995 or 1996 and is in a care facility." It was a big shock for him as it seemed too late for him to contact Sister Margaret. He tried to digest it and returned home with a heavy heart burdened with prayer for her. He explained it to his wife. Soon as he phoned Sister June, she immediately recognized his voice without introduction. She also explained about Sister Margaret and said, "Sister Margaret remembers some of the things and is content. I minister to the senior citizens in a church here." Omar got online with Sister Margaret. He spoke slowly with sadness and doubt whether she would remember him. "Sister, I am Omar from Vajagapati, living here," and paused for her response to see what her she could recognize him. Immediately but slowly she replied in a very feeble voice, "You have come a long way, good to hear from you." Her recognition brought comfort to him. After few moments of few words, she said, "Let us keep in touch," and hanged up. In the beginning 2001 January, Sister June visited Omar family on her way to and from India. They took her around for sightseeing, and had good time sharing about the Christian brethren and their ministry in India. During the Good Friday and Easter break Omar with his wife visited Sister June at Portland, USA, and enjoyed sharing his testimony in her church. He met Pastor Kennington and his wife who visited these missionary sisters and the churches in India about 25 years ago. Meanwhile Omar talked to Sister Margaret few times. Her communication was reduced to almost nil as well as her hearing and sight were extensively impaired, so he lost her contact, but he just kept in contact with the care facility staff regarding her health, which was generally good. Chapter 52. Return of the Tragedy. He worked without annual vacation as he wanted to visit India next summer. It was 5 years since they had been to India and seen the family and friends. So they planned to spend their 2001 summer in India. Since they had not seen Shah Jahan for 11 years after he immigrated to UK, they wanted to visit him for 2 weeks on their way. God blessed them to see them, share his testimony in 2 churches and tour London. They visited the church at Delhi and God granted grace to testify about his grace. After touring Delhi, they travelled to Bangalore to see Omar's brothers, Mitheen and Salim, and their families. Mitheen took them for sightseeing at Crocodile Conservatory and Mysore Palace. After few days, he drove them to his sister, Fatima's home at Salem. While they spent few days there, Omar had diarrhea-like symptoms and had biryani from a restaurant. Then they visited his wife's family. The same day he started to feel weak in legs in a shopping area causing difficulty to walk. CPM church minister, Pastor Chelakumar visited him and prayed for him, and next morning his fingers were weak. Immediately he realized that it was a relapse of GBS he had in 1996. But from the onset of symptoms he felt a strong faith that he would come out of it in few weeks like the first time in 1996 by the miraculous God's healing power. The feeling was overwhelming and unshakable. It must be given by loving Jesus through his abundant grace. Otherwise it was impossible to have that kind of assurance. Immediately he informed Mithine as medical facilities are world-class there. After Fatima and his nieces visited him briefly, without delay they travelled to Mithine House at Bangalore. Same night he was admitted into a large specialized hospital. Even though Omar intimated ABO UTGBS, the neurologist refused to acknowledge it as diagnosis and delayed the treatment. After one-day hospitalization, the neurologist recommended another medical college hospital for plasmapheresis, and so he was admitted in it after the neurologist agreed to administer plasmapheresis immediately. But the neurologist visited the next day and delayed for 1 or 2 days before giving him high dose of red blood cell treatment, as they refused to accept the investigations done by previous hospital doctors and repeated the same investigations. Omar family understood clearly that this was just to get maximum money. The physiotherapist also did physically exhausting initial assessment which Omar objected as it could cause more paralysis. Certainly it did. By this time the paralysis progressed rapidly to total paralysis from neck downwards, a condition called flaccid quadriplegia. Breathing became progressively difficult due to paralysis of chest and trunk muscles, as well, developed eating difficulty. These situations could lead to pneumonia as the food could enter lungs. So he was put on nasal oxygen supply and feeding through nasal gastric tube. They finally started administering high dose of red blood cell. He was trying to breathe laboriously and consciously day and night, hoping to keep himself alive. Meanwhile the doctors informed the family secretly that his survival was 50-50th chance. Omar thought that perhaps he visited his homeland to complete his life journey and to be buried near his mom's grave at Vellore, where they bought another spot beside her. Finally this may be the end of his life. A strong realization came upon him that at this very moment his job, education, wealth, social life etc. were lost indefinitely, and if he would die, no more family relationships like siblings, wife, others etc. This could happen at any moment. However, God continued to give strong faith. From this very severe attack, he hit the bottom of GBS along with his family. He was steadfast in prayer. Only God can give deliverance. Doctors had no words of hope. After 5 weeks of intensive care admission, he went to a semi-private ward which he preferred to full private ward, as there would be another patient with the family for emergency under his circumstances that he could not call for help due to his whispering feeble voice. He had many respiratory infections affecting a part of his lungs and pain 24 hours 7 days in the abdomen for weeks. God wonderfully delivered him from such complications. From first day of his admission, his brother, Salim, helped him every night for 40 days. During the day Salim took care of his other responsibilities. His wife and children visited him almost every evening, even in the continuous rain. Omar's wife assisted him during the daytime. To relieve them from this treacherous situation, Mithine hired 2 attendants for help, one during the day and another during the night. In addition, during the daytime Salim and Omar's wife spent time with him. They had to turn him in the bed frequently, a speci ally during night time as he had lot of pain. Dr. Rose visited him frequently, postponing his overseas ministry trips. Omar's insurance company was very supportive, in liaison with the doctors. Finally the neurologist recommended that his condition was stable to travel to Canada. Omar's insurance company from USA arranged for a nurse from Singapore to take him back to Canada in business class. Omar should have been transported in a bed, but due to the mistake in the neurologist's recommendation, after 7 weeks of hospitalization, in the last week of September 2002 he had to travel in sitting position for 9 hours from Bangalore to Germany. After having few hours rest in Frankfurt, Germany, they traveled to Canada for another 9 hours. From the airport he was taken to local hospital in an ambulance and admitted. Omar felt home as soon as they reached Canada, as God has given this place as his home. He was comfortable in a private room with his wife and friendly good hospital service. Brethren from the church visited them soon after his admission. Employer visited regularly. They continued to look at God for full recovery. Months passed by, but the recovery was very insignificant. He required 2 nurses to turn him in the bed, make him to sit up and do everything for him. Due to this need for 2 staff, rehab department did not want to admit him until Christmas holidays. Since many inpatients went for Christmas break, Omar was temporarily admitted in the rehab. During this period, the medical team informed Omar that he should consider a wheelchair-accessible house or group home on discharge, as good improvement was not expected and in view of his 2-people dependency. This was shattering thought for Omar and his wife, even though their judgment was medically understandable. They sought God's grace and mercy for miraculous recovery. It was Christmas morning. He looked at the bright sunshine on pure white snow on the trees and lawn and buildings. It reminded him about his last Christmas and how happily they enjoyed, and today in a bed unable to move. Sorrow welled up in his heart, and like for the first time he started to break down due to his miserable condition, and tears flowed like a stream from his eyes. Until this day he had strong faith in God's miraculous healing touch. In February 2002, after debate about his eligibility to benefit from rehab, he was given admission to in a provincial specialized rehab hospital. On the noon to transfer him, the ambulance people were taking him in a stretcher from the present hospital. The nurses bid farewell and Omar replied, "God will heal me and I will come back walking." As the physio and other team members did not expect him to walk, and their purpose for transfer was to help him to learn to do some of the self-care skills with help, the nurse without hope replied, "Whatever, wish you good luck." He tried to hang on to his faith. In the provincial rehab center, the physical medicine and rehabilitation specialist doctor leaned over his bed soon after hours of admission and asked, "What is your goal to achieve during your admission here?" He replied, "With or without equipments and help, I like to walk." The doctor abruptly replied, "Not in this life. Maybe we can help you to learn some self-help skills with someone's assistance so that it'll reduce the amount of help you will need." Omar, without defending himself, continued, "I like to do personal care skills also by myself." There seemed to be no point in discussing with the doctor about faith in Christ and God's miraculous healing power. Next morning as he woke up, same doctor repeated to help Omar to accept his judgment, not even standing possible, and even with 3 years of therapy. Better you have realistic expectation to rehab here. On the 3rd day wake up time also the doctor did the same, trying to change his mind. Omar knew it was part of rehab professionals' duty to help patients to have realistic goals, otherwise rehab might not be effective. However, he was steadfast with his wife and the church in believing and praying for a miraculous healing from Jesus. One day, with total help from a physio and her assistant, he was standing between the parallel bars momentarily. At that time, the same specialist doctor came looking for another patient, and he was surprised with a shock to see Omar standing with help. He shook his head and went away without a word. His stay was supposed to be 4 weeks. They had team meeting in which the specialist commented, "It is a surprise that you are standing with help momentarily for your own satisfaction, but it is not going to be functional. So I strongly recommend a power wheelchair for you." He meant that Omar would not be able to stand up. Omar's colleague friend was in the meeting to support him. His stay was extended for 4 more weeks. Jesus continued to strengthen him slowly and to help him to stand up and walk with lot of help. He started to stand up from a power wheelchair holding onto a tabletop near a window, standing table in rehab rooms, his whole being was filled with joy and gratitude and praise for Jesus. After 9 months in the bed and power or manual wheelchair, first time he was able to see the world through the window standing upright. A Jewish school kids were playing on the playground. They had little caps on their head. They were full of excitement, and the Jewish people were going in and out of their synagogue which was adjacent to the school. It was like coming back to life. During the 2002 Good Friday and Easter time, Pastor Stephen's only son, who had training in hotel administration, met a motorcycle accident at a railway crossing in Madurai, India after Sunday morning service and went to be with the Lord in heavenly home. It was another great tragedy. One day a nurse left Omar in the shower alone asking him to apply soap, and this negligence caused him to slip down from the wheelchair, almost having a fall, but Jesus saved him from such a dangerous accident. Omar believed that Jesus would help him to go home walking, and hence asked the physio and occupational therapists to propose for extension of his stay for some more time. They could not understand his faith. An assessment for electric wheelchair was done and he was transferred back to the previous hospital rehab where he was walking with lot of help between the parallel bars. This hospital specialist exclaimed, "What a pleasant surprise! You are a miracle man." Well, Jesus answered prayers and enabled me to walk. After a month's stay, June 2002, he was discharged to go home. That same day morning, Omar read Acts of the Apostles chapter 3 where God miraculously healed a born lame man to leap, jump and praise God. From the hospital to his home in a minivan, he looked at the streets and houses eagerly with bubbling emotion. 11 months ago he went this way to the airport in a cab with his wife to spend his vacation, and now was coming back with a manual wheelchair and a regular walker. The minister with Eucharistia and brethren welcomed him on his return. He could not explain his feelings as he entered his house and sat on a sofa chair and looked through the window. He felt that it was more than enough blessing to be able to sit at home and could spend the rest of his life sitting there. After some time they prayed thanking Jesus. Jesus spoke through a prophecy, my son, the beautiful gate is open and enters with leaping, jumping, and praising God. I have made your muscles, bones and nerves strong," and it was repeated few times. Omar was extremely happy and shocked as none of them knew he read the same portion of the Bible that day morning in the hospital and believed for this miracle. Way he told them this, they were also surprised. Definitely it was God's miraculous way of prophecy. Jesus revealed through many prophecies about his healing as God's will. Home care support was provided twice daily and occupational therapy once in few weeks. Church believers helped with transporting him to the church, and other forms of many help. One Saturday, he fell down in the middle of the living room as he was practicing walking. He could not sit up and his wife could not help. A believer came to help. Now they lived in the ground floor as he could not go to upstairs, which was their living place before he fell sick. Every time he looked at the stairs, he did not think that he could climb it as his legs were so weak, but he believed Jesus for such a miracle. July 13, 2002, they had Thanksgiving prayer and feast at home with his brother's family and the church. Same night the minister saw a dream in which Omar was walking fast in the ground floor, running to the upstairs without falling even though he stumbled on the stairs. After few months, the occupational therapist assisted him to climb halfway through. Again he looked up to see the upstairs through handrails with overwhelming emotions. After about 1 year and 3 months, finally the day came. With help he reached the upstairs and sat on his sofa. He felt that he was back and had the same feeling of satisfaction about recovery and life as he had on return to home from hospital. He thought he could not ask for better things. Soon he moved to the upstairs and slept in his bed for the first time with unbelievable happiness. Never he realized the beauty of sleeping in his bed. It is where you belong. Months rolled by and Jesus strengthened him to walk progressively with wheeled walker, cane, and without aid inside the house. In 2003, with the desire to glorify God in USA International Convention for the Miraculous Healing, with wife he traveled first to visit his brother's family. Considering his feeble health, he did not attend the convention. They enjoyed the change of place and touring many places including the world's tallest building, the widest Niagara WA, Turf Falls, etc., and returned home. In 2004, later Omar and his wife attended the USA International Convention and glorified God for the healing as well as the miracles for his family all through the years. They also visited his wife's brother and her relatives as well as his brother's family. Since he developed respiratory infection requiring rest for 3 to 4 months, again it occurred twice. They thought that long travel might not be suitable for his health and decided to just stay near home. In 2005, since his wife's parents fell very sick, she made a trip to India for 2 months. God was wonderful in helping him to stay alone. He tried volunteer work which he could do for some time only. He started to spend his time in prayer and ministry in a small way. Jesus became his victor, health, life, strength, joy, and peace. He kept in touch with the Vajagapati Christian Church and the Christians in those regions. God marvelously blessed the early 3 families, Pastor Stephen, Mrs. Nazira Begum and Mrs. Deva Kairabai Amal. Pastor Stephen's wife, Sister Leela, went to be with the Lord around 1990. Pastor Stephen's 4 daughters got married and well settled, one of them permanently settled in USA. Another daughter immigrated temporarily to Gulf countries. Pastor Stephen was sick for a few years and entered glory in January 4, 2012. His funeral was honored by nearly 500 people. This showed the fruits of approximately 45 years of his ministry in Vajagapati and surrounding cities. Perhaps he was the first fruit and first born-again Pentecostal Christian and God's minister in Vajagapati history and surrounding villages, as well as his wedding with Sister Leela in late 1970s was the first Christian wedding. In the midst of his Hindu family opposition and difficult to reach out Hindu city, it is certainly God's miracle and grace and Holy Spirit power and his love for the salvation of his hometown people made it possible. Sister Margaret James Baker, Canada, and Sister Radha, Madurai, also entered glory around 2008 and 2010. Just around year 2010 Papampati Christian Church ministers Pastor Panjiyaratnam and Sister Shantha entered heavenly glory while former Kodaikanal Christian Church Pastor Johnson Jacob was called to heavenly abode in 2014. Sister June B. Ward continues as Emmanuel Christian Fellowship Church Seniors Pastor in her age of 80s in Portland, USA. It is faith ministry and continues supporting ministries in India. Pastor Senior Kennington in Chicago, USA, who was early years sponsors of Sisters Margaret and June, also completed his race in 2013 or 2014. Mrs. Deva Kairabai Amal's children were blessed to do God's ministry marvelously and also to travel to overseas for employment. One of the believers from Kamakapati belonging to Vajagapati Christian Church, Robert, was blessed by God as Inspector General IG in Tamil Nadu Police Service. One of the neighbor boy of Vajagapati Christian Church who was classmate to Mitheen became Tamil cinema song composer, Ilayaraja. Very amazing to see how God blessed the 3 families of that little church in this amazing way. Mrs. Nazira Begum and her children were the first born-again Pentecostal Christian believer family from Vajagapati. Her life is like a nightingale that is sitting on a lonely tree on a single rock island, singing beautifully in a dark stormy night with thunders and lightnings all around and raging ocean.